What's up, everybody? I hope you're doing well. Welcome to the extended cut, minimally edited podcast version of today's episode, where we're going to talk about some of the most common misconceptions people have about therapists and the therapy career in general. I'm so excited to dive into this one, and I thought it would be a great idea to just put a poll out on Instagram and ask you all what some of the most common misconceptions are about your job, and y'all showed up. I got 45 responses. Thank you to those of you who replied, and we're going to go over some of the themes that came up in your responses today. Now, for those of you who are following along on the video version of this episode, you may notice I've embraced some chill vibes today. You probably also hear it in my voice if you're listening to just the audio, or I'm at the end of a sickness. I'm still a little tired, so I'm going to be low energy. I'm sitting crisscross. I got my natural hair texture going, and we're doing it. Okay, without further ado, let's dive into some of the themes that popped up in response to the question, what are some of the most common misconceptions folks have about your career as a therapist? Now, keep in mind, I was the one that organized these themes, so you may have organized them into different themes compared to how I did it, but this is just how they made sense based on how I saw people's responses. So given all of that, far and away, the most common theme in folks' responses is that your job as a therapist is super easy. I know any of you who is a therapist is probably chuckling with me when you hear that, because in what world is this job super easy? But let's break it down into subcategories for a second. So the most popular subcategory within this theme of your job being super easy is that you just give advice. So here's some examples of what folks said within this subcategory. That I give people advice all day long. We give advice. That we give advice for a living. That my job is to give people advice or to tell them what to do. I actively advise my clients on what to do, and so on. So clearly, all of those sound pretty similar to each other. All we do is sit around and just give advice. You have a problem? Here's what you should do to fix it. And again, for those of us who are therapists listening to that, you have to be chuckling along with me, because that is so far from what we do. Sometimes we may feel tempted to give advice because maybe we're feeling certain ways about the client that we're working with, but it's not our job to give our clients advice. In fact, therapy is about helping our clients figure out what's best for them. Us implementing what we think is best for them upon them can create a very oppressive or harmful power dynamic. That's what a lot of other people in our clients' lives may be doing already, and they're needing something different. And along the same lines, another subcategory in this theme of your job is super easy is that you just chat and listen with your clients all day. So here's some of the things people said in this category. That I just listen to people talk and get paid to do not much. That I just sit there and listen. Probably that therapists get paid to just sit and talk to people all day. I just sit and listen to people complain all day, and that is my only burden. Oh, wow. Now, certainly, do we talk during therapy as therapists? Yes. Do we listen during therapy as therapists? Yes. Otherwise, what else are we doing exactly? But this idea that all we do is just kind of jibber jabber around, we're just chatting, we're just listening, and that's it. Sounds pretty easy, right? That is so not what we do. I think what can happen in these misconceptions is because people are operating from how they see the world. If they're not a therapist and they try to imagine what it's like to be in therapy, especially if they have never been in therapy themselves, is that they just imagine what they would do without any particular therapist training if they were sitting in the therapist chair, and they think, man, I'd probably just be sitting and listening and chatting sometimes. And yeah, to be fair, if I didn't have any training, that's what I'd be doing too. In reality, somebody who's equipped and has the bandwidth to offer really good therapy is going to be making their best efforts to enter in to their client's reality. We're not just chit-chatting, we're trying to understand all the layers of what's going on for a client, especially if they're saying they're dealing with an issue or a problem and they need help. They've tried everything, nothing seems to be working. That tells us that maybe there's something missing that we haven't caught on to yet. So we have to know how to kind of play detective, ask the right questions to kind of find new puzzle pieces, ways to zoom out to look at their situation from a different perspective than our clients who might be very zoomed in on a specific aspect of their issue. So we have to know how to interact with our client in a way that they experience us as caring and empathic, while also gathering puzzle pieces, putting them together in the back of our mind, and offering it back to our clients in a way that they can be receptive to hearing it. Because oftentimes we're encouraging our clients to see things maybe in a new light or from a different perspective than they have so far in order to help them move towards solving whatever they're here for. And I don't know about you, but for me, that feels like a lot of work. Even though I love the work, my brain is going. You know what it feels most similar to for me? If any of you all have learned a second language later in your life, that process of like immersing yourself in a culture where they're speaking that second language exclusively, it feels like a lot of work in your brain, even though you don't see any of it usually on the outside. And if you're doing a really good job learning that second language, you just seem fluent, like it's just no big deal. But your brain is translating everything back and forth from one language back to the other and then back again when you think of your response. And it's a ton of brain work. That's how I feel about my job as a therapist, at least. And it gets a little more fluent over time, but it's still quite a bit that's happening in the brain when we're working with our clients. And the last subcategory in this theme of your job is super easy as a therapist is just that it's easy. There were several comments about how people seem to think that our job is not particularly emotionally taxing. So here's some examples of what people said. That it isn't energy taxing. People just see the money, so why not work a full week of clients? They don't understand how much the downregulation time is part of the work. And people don't realize the amount of administrative and training hours that go into our job. Yes, so there's a bunch of variables that make our job not as easy as it might seem on face value, that people seem to think you just sit down, chat and listen, you go charge your, $100 and something a session and go about your day. Why not see 40 clients a week and just go home and chill? Super easy, right? And there's a bunch of admin tasks that do come with our work. And also for a lot of us, hour for hour, 1 hour of sitting with a client, at least for me, is way more emotionally taxing than 1 hour where I'm sitting down recording a video like this, or 1 hour editing a video, or 1 hour responding to emails, which probably looks a little bit more similar to a lot of other people's typical daily jobs. So you need a lot more time in your schedule and arguably as part of your work schedule to recover from all the time that you spend seeing clients. The next theme that came up in people's responses as far as what misconceptions people have about our career as a therapist is that we know a lot of stuff. To be fair, we do know a lot of stuff, but let's get into some of the specifics to illuminate how this becomes a misconception. So one subcategory within this theme is that you have all the answers to pretty much everything. Here's some of the responses that fit into this category. That I know all of the answers to every imaginable mental health concern. I know how to deal with everyone's feelings. The therapist knows all the answers. That I have all the answers and that I'm always analyzing everyone. I mean, that would be terrifying if we had the answers to everything. We're still human beings. We do not know everything about everything. We don't even know everything about mental health stuff. We do not have all the answers. That kind of goes back to the advice piece where, if we had the answer, we would just give somebody some advice and they would do it theoretically. Though it doesn't actually work that way anyway, but I could see how the misconception is, I have the answer, so here's my advice, go and do it and go forth and feel better. And that's just not what our job looks like. The other subcategory in this theme of a lot of stuff is that we can read minds. I was surprised how many responses were in this little subcategory. Here's some examples. That I can read people's thoughts. I can read minds. That I automatically know what's wrong with them. What does that even mean? Not my career, but people and my clients sometimes think I have psychic abilities. I don't. And in Japan, people still think we're the same as fortune tellers and palm readers. That's so interesting. I don't think I've really heard that one before, but I could see how that misconception might have crept into our culture. Like we have these sort of magical superpowers that we just automatically know what's going on for someone just by looking at them. Now, I will say sometimes there are things that I feel like I can perceive pretty readily because I've seen them over and over and over again that, sometimes the look of someone who's deep in depression feels like it's written all over their bodies to me because I've seen it so many times that those little tiny cues start to become really telltale signs to me. Or, kind of more obviously, someone who has had an extensive history with abusing substances, especially certain substances, kind of have a look to them. So, there's things like that you can start to pick up on over time and be pretty sure you know about just by looking at somebody. But no, we cannot read minds. And the amount of times that I do have clients say things like, "Oh, didn't you know?" or "Isn't it obvious?" when they didn't actually tell me anything about the thing that they thought was obvious. It surprises me. So I guess I shouldn't have been surprised that this is a subcategory in these misconceptions. Okay, the third major misconception folks have about our career as therapists is that we make bank. And yeah, we talked about this before on my channel. If you've been following my stuff, we know already that therapists are not making bank, and we can do the math to show that very quickly. Just because the hourly rate a therapist is charging might seem quite high, it does not mean that they're seeing that rate for 40 hours a week, and it doesn't mean that they get to pocket all of that rate either. So yeah, a lot of therapists, unfortunately most therapists, are not really earning enough, especially when you account for how much student debt therapists have and how much delayed income therapists have to take on because you're in grad school and post-grad training for so long that you could have been working that whole time and earning some kind of income. That essentially a lot of therapists, when you do all that math, are earning less than most folks who don't have any graduate level of training in their career. Let's read some of the responses in this category. That I'm rich, making bank, and "oh, it's so easy, I'd love that job." There we go, harking back to the "your job is easy" theme. That I'm rolling in it when actually it all goes to room cover, insurance, and continuing professional development. That I get paid decent. That I'm rich. That I'm rich, LOL. And somebody phrased it that we don't make money, which maybe they might have been saying the opposite, that the misconception is we don't make money and maybe this person makes a lot of money. So that could be a misconception too. There are some therapists who do make bank, but it's not most therapists. So there you go. And the last major misconception about our career that people shared in their responses is that we have it all together. Don't therapists just know how to be perfect humans because we learned everything that there is to be a perfect human, and hearkening back to the prior theme of we have all the answers and we just give advice, and so we must have all our stuff together, right? Not true. Let's hear some of the responses people had to say here. That my life is well balanced. That therapists don't struggle with their own mental health. That I have it all together. That I have my own life together and have no mental health issues or problems, LOL. That we either have our S together or the opposite of the spectrum, we're a mess. No in between. Censoring that word because I like to be a family-friendly thing. Anyway, yes, if anything, I would argue that therapists, on average, have it less quote-unquote together than the average person because of some of the reasons we cited earlier. We tend to be underpaid. We tend to be working at burnout levels or contexts that kind of feed into a burnout dynamic. And we're also carrying relatively heavy burdens of these stories of the folks that we work with. And depending on what context you're working in, that could be even worse. So if you're overworked and underpaid and carrying a really heavy emotional burden, that's going to set you up for emotional disaster. And we do know that burnout rates are quite high for therapists. So despite all that you know, and even though it might not be your fault at all, yeah, as a therapist, you probably don't have it all together. I mean, does anyone actually have it all together? We could say none of us have it all together, but hopefully you're tracking with what I'm saying. Okay, and for those of you listening to the extended cut version of this episode, I'm going to share those kind of miscellaneous responses that didn't neatly fit into any of the other themes, but I still think are quite noteworthy. So there's two responses that do actually go together within the miscellaneous category, and that's that you're always analyzing people. People said that I'm always psychoanalyzing people. I can't tell you how many bad dates included that question. Oh no. I think I may have bypassed some of that one because I wasn't a therapist yet by the time I started dating my now spouse, but I could see that being a whole thing. And someone else says, you're always analyzing people. I mean, here's the thing. On the one hand, it is a misconception that we're always psychoanalyzing people, especially in the way that people seem to think we are when they bring up this misconception that I am just always thinking about what's going on with their mental health and diagnostics and whatever else might be happening for that person. And that's not true in my relationships. However, because I have so much knowledge as a therapist, sometimes there's things that will flag in my mind that just wouldn't typically flag for a lay person because of the knowledge that I have as a lay person. I mean, it makes me think about how, my spouse is a physician, and sometimes he'll see something like maybe someone's face has a certain way of twitching or something like that, and I won't even notice it, and he'll go, oh, that person is dealing with da-da-da-da-da. And I didn't even notice that there was anything happening, but he's got this knowledge, and so it's just, he can't help but notice things like that. And that is definitely true for me, where sometimes there's things mental health related, diagnostic related, that I will just notice, and it's not mine to do anything with usually, but I can't help but notice some of those things. And I try not to psychoanalyze those things unless there's something bigger going on, like I'm trying to understand my own personal family dynamic. Or, for example, in a video like a month or two back, I referenced that somebody I used to work with was arrested. And sure, I'm definitely psychoanalyzing that whole situation because it's like, what happened there? But I'm not doing this in my day-to-day interactions when I'm chatting with a friend or, if I were to imagine dating somebody on my first dates or something like that. No, I just want to enjoy and have fun and be humans together. So in that sense, it's a misconception. I agree. Okay, here are some of the other miscellaneous misconceptions. That I want to do private practice full time. That friends think you could be their therapist. Oh yeah, I've had that happen a few times at least, where somebody asks if they can book an appointment with me, and it's like, wait, no, it doesn't work that way. Someone says, ooh, that therapy is only for people in crisis or serious mental illness. Now, actually, I was surprised that this was the only one that came up in this category, because that is a misconception that I've heard so many times. That is how my family, I think, still understands what I do for a living, that I only work with people who are at a level of crisis, that they are on the edge, basically, of being able to keep living. And though certainly therapy is for people in that state, therapy is for everyone, in any kind of situation. And if anything, when I encounter somebody who has that misconception that therapy is only for people with these really, really extreme issues, it kind of reflects more of their own internalized stigma around whatever might be going on for them, that they're not so comfortable with the idea of potentially addressing those in therapy, which is okay. Not everyone's going to be comfortable with it. It's okay, but that's probably where it comes from. And the last one in this miscellaneous category, therapy is like magic. You show up for a couple of hours and everything in your life is fixed forever. If only it worked like that. Now, I will say there are some exceptions, and in some cases, a little bit of therapy can go a super long way, especially depending on the individual and their situation. If it's targeting a very specific issue, like CBT for insomnia, for example, you don't need to go to too much therapy and potentially be free of insomnia, for real. It's very targeted and very short term. There's other types of short-term therapy, or even things like EMDR or brain spotting, where for some people, in just one or a few sessions, they experience a very radical shift. I'll say though, I think a lot of times when that happens, those people have probably been working on a lot of things already up until that moment, but I could be wrong. I'm open to being wrong. Generally, though, for most people, it's going to take more than a couple of hours of work to have any sort of radical shift in your life. Okay, well, despite feeling still pretty under the weather, I enjoyed going through these. I really appreciate all of you sending in your responses, because sometimes I'm just making videos by myself and I'm going, is this how other people would see this situation though? And it's really helpful to see that, a lot of the misconceptions that I would have thought of are confirmed by you all. And you also named some things that I hadn't thought of. So I really appreciate all of you chiming in. And I'm curious, as you listen to this episode, if there's any misconceptions you hear about the therapy profession that I didn't get to mention today, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I think it's helpful to be educated about, what are the misconceptions of therapy, so that hopefully folks can get a clearer idea, both as therapists entering the field, but also as therapy clients considering seeing a therapist. Hopefully together we can help destigmatize the work that we do. And to all of you therapists listening out there, thank you for the work that you do. I know directly from experience that this work is not easy, and for most therapists, you're also quite underpaid. And people don't realize either of those things about what you do. They just think you have it super easy and you're just like, I don't know, rolling in it when maybe neither of those things are true. So hopefully it's encouraging too to just kind of debunk those misconceptions as well and feel a little more seen. I think that's just about all I have to give from the under the weather part of me that's here today. So I'll leave off here. If the video version of this was minimally edited, it's probably because I'm sick. Thanks for being patient. And until next time, from one therapist to another, I wish you well.